probably have read some recipes and stuff, and if you see a little lump of salt, you might want to make sure it breaks up. You do want to have that focus on getting the salt as exact as possible. You'll see people recipes calling for fresh yeast. I've used it lots, working for various bakeries, and it's wonderful yeast. It works great. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give people the total experience at John C. Campbell one year, maybe even 2 years, and I went to Earth Fair, and at that time you could buy a pound of that yeast from them. And several people tried using it both ways, using active dry yeast and fresh yeast in the same recipe at the same time, 2 different bowls. None of us could tell any difference at any stage. We could not, even though the bakers swear by it, we could not prove them right. It doesn't mean they're not right. There may be something we don't know. They have to do with conditions or stability down the road, more flexible, I don't know. But in in that crucible, at that situation, there was no difference. So I wouldn't worry about, oh, I don't have fresh yeast, I think the dry. But what you don't want to use if you're making artisan bread is rapid rise. It's kind of confusing because before they came out with rapid rise, they had instant yeast. I mean, it really should be that the yeast we use is called rapid rise, and the instant is the stuff that happens super fast. But it's not. Instant yeast is slower than rapid rise. Rapid rise is too fast. There's no time to develop flavor and nutrition. And indeed, you have to use very warm water for it to work well. And very warm water means a very warm dough, which means it's going to rise much faster, which means you don't get the time. You have to go fast with it. And when you go fast, you don't get the flavor and the nutrition and the keeping qualities. So, as far as I'm concerned, if you think there's going to be some time when you want to make some kind of flavorless but fresh out of the oven rolls or something, then keep some rapid rise yeast in your freezer. But write a big skull and crossbones on it for the rest of your time, because it is death to flavor. It will not do you any good at all. All right, so I now have the salt in there. And when I first started baking, I really was obsessive about trying to make sure the salt was well distributed. And as I've said now, it's simply the kneading process. I know totally will get it thoroughly distributed, so I don't have to worry about it. So at this stage, I'm just seeing, do I have to add more flour? And I probably do. But I'm going to see if I can get it to a rough dough, I will, and I'll start kneading. But you can see how great the scraper is, and that's the technique I really like at this stage, is basically folding, right? If you do egg whites or something, you can see what I'm doing there, It's a good mixing process, and you can see already probably why the bowl is so nice, right? It really gives you a lot of control. You can work pretty fast. I'm getting pretty close. I'll be able to start kneading this really soon. I'm going to need more flour, but not a whole lot. Okay, so we're there. The one danger of the way I teach this, which is really to emphasize the hydration, is that until you get comfortable with it, it can really slow you down. Because I'm going to get you to the point where you're going to be afraid to do what I just did. Take a big handful, but I know, I can look at it and say, okay, I know I'm going to need that much more to get where I need to be, It's fine in the learning process to go a little slow at first. Just do it, go a little slow. But I'm saying I'm probably going to start kneading after this, after I get this part incorporated. Once I get to this stage, my remaining flour, to me, is no longer an ingredient. It is an aid to kneading. And that's it, okay? So I'm going to use as little as possible. It's simply an aid, and my goal, it's kind of a game, is to see how little I can use. Okay. All right. And I still know it's going to be much more than it will be later on. And so I'm not being as precise as I'll be later on. Later on, I'm going to be doing things like taking this much flour and going like that. And that much is going to allow me to keep kneading. Okay? But at this stage, I know that's not the case. All right, now what I've done, right, is I've covered the top of the dough in flour. Okay? If I were to knead now, I'd be putting all the flour in on itself. It's a kneading aid. I don't need flour on top of flour, right? I need flour distributed well over the whole dough. Okay? So what I do is I get it freed up. And see how I'm really going under quickly and really freeing it up? Don't get caught up in taking a lot of time on it, because it'll be sticking as you're taking time, okay? It's a few rapid strokes, right? Okay, and then flip it. And use 2 hands if you have to. I'm comfortable with it, but it's about, what you're trying to do at this point is keep the dough as one organism, okay? One living blob, and not tear it, not rip it apart, because every time you're tearing it, you're damaging the gluten. And you're exposing a spot that's going to be much wetter and cause your dough to get sticky, and you need more flour. So the more you tear it, the more it's sticky, the more flour you get. Also, you want to keep your hands cleaner than mine. I know how to work with my hands like this, but if your hands are sticky, they're going to stick to the dough, they're going to make tears, you're going to need more flour. You know? So I recommend actually to oil your hands. Once you've gotten to this stage, you clean your hands well and oil them. And even oil your scraper if you're still using it, you know, so you don't keep tearing the dough. If it's starting to tear, you need a little more flour. What I finally learned to pay attention to is my students will be kneading, and I'll say, okay, you're there, but you can knead longer, just so you can get the feel for it. And you can't really over knead by hand. If you got a mixer, you can over knead in no time flat, you know. But if you're kneading by hand, it's going to be a good trick to over knead. So it's a good way to get your technique and learn it and punch it and see how well it works, you know, and just keep developing your technique to keep kneading for a while. But my students don't get that every motion on the dough, right, causes micro tears. And so they keep adding flour, and they keep thinking because it tears that it's not, that it's because the dough's wet, not because their mechanical action's tearing it, and they add too much flour. It kept getting wet, so I had to keep adding flour. No, no, it's getting wet because you're kneading it, and it will get wet because you're kneading it. It's the process. Okay? It's the process. So you just still stay on that incredibly light dusting, just barely enough to allow you to knead it. And it's amazing how little it needs as you get towards the end. It's just the teeniest amount. Okay, so I've got the flour all underneath. Now you see that now, it's on the outside, and so I take it, I flip it to itself, the flour's all where I need it. It's underneath and it's on top, it's not inside, right? I push it away from myself, I flip it, push it away from myself. Flip it on itself, I push it. And notice that I'm not just pushing down and stopping, I'm going across the bowl. See the motion? And it's a pretty rapid motion with the heel of my hand. See? And you can see the dough is coming together pretty darn fast, you know? And I'm sticking more than you should. It's all about, as you get your techniques, you know that you can stick a little bit, save your time, not have to clean. But as you're starting, try not to stick at all. You know, make it a goal to not stick. Just keep your hands clean, keep it dusted. And then as you get your technique up, you can throw a lot of those early things out the window. You know, it's often the case with skills as you're first learning them, you have to be much more strict with all of the rules. And then you learn where you can bend the rules, where it saves time to bend the rules. Okay? All right, but even now I can tell I'm getting sticky enough that it's time for dusting. But I know now I no longer can do that big amount that I just did. Now it's just like, and I try to shoot for the side of the bowl so the flour falls over it. Now I know I didn't get perfect distribution, so then I just do a kind of pat it around, okay? And then I free it up, once again, quickly, going around the bottom. And once again, it's not sticking and I get to knead. Getting a little sticky. It's not quite there. Do you see what I just did, how I slapped it and how it came back? That tells you when you're done, okay? When you're done, you slap it, and it comes back, you can hardly see it come back. It comes back so fast, you can hardly see it come back. And that is what tells you your dough is ready. Okay? At the other end, when it's time to bake your dough, you do a similar thing. It's way more gentle, because your dough now has been rising, and there's a whole lot of air in it, and it's real fragile. You moisten your finger because it'll stick to it and pull the dough back with it, but you moisten your finger, and then you push it in very gently. And see, what I did just now came right back, right? If your dough's ready to bake, it won't come back. Or it'll come back very, very slowly. It's the same function, okay? You have wound the gluten up like a rubber band right now, so when you hit it, it pops back. It relaxes, right? As soon as you stop working it, it gets to relax, okay? As it proofs, it relaxes incredibly. So there's not much elasticity when it's time to bake. So you give it a gentle push and it doesn't come back. You get the concept? Mm-hmm. So the same function, right? That the development of the gluten, right? The tension in the gluten tells you when your dough is kneaded enough, and later on, the absence of that tension, right? Or resilience tells you when your dough is ready to bake. You know, and that to me is probably the most valuable thing I teach you, besides getting you to not use too much flour, because you can't get that from a book, because it doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you got to figure it out without having given you the parameters, which you can't really get from a book. So that's the other thing about recipes, okay? Don't use all the flour and pay no attention to their time frames. The time frames all come from your interaction with the dough, okay? And are totally dependent on the temperature in your room, the temperature of your ingredients, the temperature of your bowl, okay? The activity of your yeast. I'm sure different commercial yeasts have different activities. If you're using a sourdough starter, it's going to be, you know, My friend Bob Strickland, who's my assistant a lot of the times at John C. Campbell, is the polar opposite to me. He's a former aerospace engineer. And I could never be an aerospace engineer. It says 3.5 hours. It's been 6. It's dead. Bob, wait. First time we did this, it was a persimmon starter that we collected. Wild persimmons make a wonderful starter. And even I thought it was dead, right? I came down the next morning, it was huge. Yes, the salt is fine. What you slow maintain particles is the herbs from us are doing potassium salt.
I'm really excited about your January.
Good. I want to sign up for the class you don't know about yet. Okay. It's really great. It's an ongoing collaboration with the co-op, and I just love doing that. Because the co-op is just the perfect institution to support this.
Oh, you mean, are there a lot of
Right.
because I signed up for no.
I'm worried about, okay, so this is
Okay.
yeah, that's what makes me nervous. I think we just need to overall not be nervous. Just do it.
You'll pay for it. You'll pay for it with this.
This is good, real bad.
That one, I'm going to try and always have it be the first weekend of January. I think that's going to be a little tougher because it's in Johnson.
Yeah. And we're going to need to layer it.
See, the first weekend is right around New Year's. So I think the staff is going to have to be later. Which is kind of fine for starting, because it's a little early to start that before that. Okay.
4 hours.
All right.
Oh, right here. On the, I remember. Yes. I've never been on that.
Just adding some flour, right?
I'm going to make him dough. I don't know what you're doing.
Wait, so do I use all this flour?
Who said that?
What'd you say?
It's not nice to tease your teacher.
Do I use all this flour?
Let me bring the rest of the bag here.
We got our own over here. We're good.
For what people? The whole bag. For OBGYN. Oh, that's awesome.
You were going to use this as a lawnmower, weren't you?
Yeah.
So he's postponed.
Oh, God. I don't know if my technique is working. Oh, did you add your yeast in there yet?
I got it all in here.
Oh, you did it too fast. You did it too much. I'm going to do, what's that called?
Have you added? Have you put in the yeast yet?
I just did.
Alright, I'm doing it. Hey, this chick snap.
You know what? I'm like an artisan bond with this bread already. It's a living creature. We've already.
Tom tells us the pizza dough is scary, by the way.
It's scary?
Scary.
Oh my God, this smells
That's a
good.
very good parameter.
That with a layer.
That's still living.
I want to see your technique.
Right now, it's wet technique.
Folks, is anybody measuring?
Yes.
Okay, finish your measuring.
No, I'm finished.
Okay, all right. Okay. I don't like to talk when people are measuring, but because that will mess you up, you know. At least it messes me up if I'm measuring. As Saya was doing hers, but she was using more whole wheat. It reminds me, I want to tell you something about whole wheat. If you're working with whole wheat, because it has gluten, because it has bran and germ, neither of which are very absorptive, it's way slower to take in water. So a very good trick with whole wheat is to add the bulk of your water, of your flour, even in a direct dough, to the water and walk away for 10 minutes. Now you might as well, while you're at it, autolyze it and mix it up. But the reason you need to do that is you need to let that water take the 10 minutes to absorb, or what will happen is you'll be trying to knead it, and it'll seem way too wet, so you'll add flour. It's actually not wet, it's just the water's on the outside, and it hasn't gotten in yet. And by the time it finally gets in, you'll have way too much flour. So just know that. You should probably mix the flour in.
You put the salt in?
Yes, you can ask all the questions you want.
So, when we get home, maybe we're not going to have an old dough.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right?
I'll give you a recipe for making one.
Okay, cool.
You're making an old dough?
Yes.
So does the old
You can actually, and the recipe's a great bread. You can save half of it
Right.
for old dough and use half of it right away.
Could we just use this recipe without the...
You can. You
Okay.
can. Yeah, you can. The thing is, the recipe I use is that recipe that I collapsed a 48 hours fermentation into 5 hours or something.
Okay.
Because it uses a little bit of milk in the starter
Okay.
and very hot water in the starter, it develops a very specific flavor
Okay.
that's very nice.
Okay.
You can almost smell it. You smell it.
I smelled it earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
smells
has,
like beer.
Yeah, right, exactly. Thank you. You know, I say that for years and I think, is it true or are they just, you know,
Yeah.
but I didn't have to suggest that to you. It smells like beer.
Totally.
You use this recipe and when it smells like beer, it's ready. Not how much time, when does it smell like beer?
I love it. It's like when you
So
go
give
to a
us that
brewery,
recipe
it's
you
just what
did
it
for
smells like.
the start, or I guess the old.
Yeah, it's also a great whole wheat baguette. I called it the hearty baguette, you know. And you know, this is the first class I decided, you know, I'm letting go of it. I'm not going back into production. It was a secret recipe for me forever.
Really?
Yeah, I just didn't, because I knew nobody else was getting that flavor. And, you know, that's okay. I'm just going to teach. So you're all going to get the recipe. But it's not printed out because I had to come to that. That was my epiphany last night. It's like, okay, I'm done holding on to that intellectual property. You know?
Okay.
It's too early for me to put the salt in.
It's, you could put the salt, as it's a direct dough, you can put the salt in as soon as the yeast is not in the way. And the yeast that you want to practice your eating, there's no reason not to. And the other reason to put the salt in as soon as you can is because you don't want to forget it. But if you know you won't forget it, and you want to do that autolyzing kind of thing, it goes a little better without it. Yeah, I do use a scraper. Do you have a scraper? Fair amount of flour on top and a quick cut around and flip and start the kneading process. Right? It's going to be hard.
What?
What I'd rather you do is watch him when he gets his done. Because it doesn't really take that long to knead. Switch to that one. It's going to be really hard. And I want you to try the bowl. I think it's a really good system. You know? And then if you decide I don't need the bowl, I don't care. You know? But a lot of my students, they do evaluations there, and not a lot, but some different bowls and say, well, the bowl is the best thing I learned. There's lots of great stuff, but that bowl's amazing. You know, so I want you to get that picked up. Clean that really good, even oil a little. We'll get some oil out for you.
There, I'm done. You are going to hell right now. There, sure.
Right.
Throw the next one down. Go down.
No, I mean, don't worry.
Right there, someplace in there.
Oh my god, I'm going to hell.
What are you doing? You think you're ready?
I'm in hell.
The more you work it, the more it's going to get sticky. That could be what's going on, okay?
Okay.
Let's give it a light dusting.
Okay. That was very like that.
Yes, very light dusting. And I can feel right there that it's a little bit, still needs it, but not much. Okay? So you're just flouring it a little. Okay, now free it up. Lots of quick motions, one quick flip. All right, great. Now, pull it to you. Push it away. And it's probably time to flour it again.
Okay.
You know?
So I'm still a little. Okay.
Yeah, you can definitely use quite a bit more flour.
Okay.
But you can knead it more too, so let the flour be the agent.
Okay.
Given how much it was sticking, you
Yeah.
can be heavier than I was. You can be more like this right now, okay?
Okay.
Okay? Because you still need a little bit of the flour.
Okay. Because it's sticking to the bottom, is that?
Well, it's sticking everywhere. It's
Yeah.
sticking to you. It's being still stickier. You know, you did such a good job of not going to hell that you're not anywhere.
I'm slightly angelic.
Right, yes, right, yeah. Yeah, right. You're in that state of limbo, you know? See how much better it looks right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like
Okay.
a nun.
Yeah. Go for it. Okay.
I'm trying to take that. It's
All right.
as wet
Yeah,
as possible.
I know. I was going for ciabatta.
Yeah, right. And that is a great ciabatta there, but you would be folding it, no longer kneading it at that point. So you can
Okay.
use a little bit more flour to get past that. You're also you're bearing in a little bit harder than you need to.
Okay.
You're looking for motion, mechanical action with as little pressure as possible.
Okay.
And you want to come off it really fast so you don't stick. If your follow-up stays on too long, you're bound to stick, okay?
That's what's my problem
Yeah.
is. Okay.
Yeah. It's looking pretty good to me. Can I have a feel? Yeah, you are a little bit
Try.
dry. And so you might want to just, you know, take a little gander and help, you know?
Where you at?
Yeah, it's just a little dead.
Oh, that's
And how
so
you
much
do
better.
that, right?
Push like
is-
that?
It's probably just purgatory, actually.
Okay, good.
Lots of prayer, a few light years, and you'll be
Well, Hail Mary.
right out of there, you know?
Okay, good.
We do some indulgences for you. Excuse me, I don't think how this, I have to stretch the metaphor.
I'm not touching it.
That's it, okay?
Is there a
See what you think. kind of.
Okay. I could tell you're going to need more flour. You can give a generous dusting, you know? Yeah, you can be, yeah, and then you can come back and pat it around well, and then flip it over and knead it. And do that a few times, maybe about 3 times, and then call me back, okay? Yes. And then I think you'll probably be where you need to be on flour.
I'm done too.
And I actually do a quick knead.
You can knead it all you want.